I guess the Rockefeller Foundation came to a crossroads during 1953 and 1954. They decided to embark in a new program. And this was before I joined. I can't tell you much about them, but maybe you could tell us what their program was and how did they really come about to do this program?
Well, there was always this problem with yellow fever that was never solved, and that was how it really was maintained. How was yellow fever actually maintained? Because there are no true carriers of yellow fever. And the monkeys and the mosquitoes are the active ingredients in the spread of yellow fever in the jungle. But there was more than, beyond that there was the question. And they thought that perhaps by studying other arthropod-borne viruses, they might get some information in the back door, some way, around the problem. Because during this time when yellow fever was, the teams would bring in material and other viruses were occasionally isolated from material that was being examined for yellow fever. Well, this interim period, Otis had wound up, they had wound up the yellow fever in Passus, and he was for a year studying the effect of insecticides on malaria transmission. That came to a close within about a year, and then he went into the office, administrative. Well, that was just a dead time in a way, but that's when we moved up to Petropolis. And he went into the, did some traveling for the fellowships and grants to universities, while the Rockefeller was deciding what they were going to do. And the virus, this arbovirus program took shape. And the problem came up to him, well, would he go to Egypt? He wasn't interested in going to Egypt. Other places were mentioned. He wanted to go to the Amazon. Well, they had already decided that Trinidad was the center for the work in that area that could take care of the Amazon. Otis said he knew he couldn't because there was too much in the Amazon. We had had those 3 years during the war. It had been, he'd seen so much that he wanted to do. So they said, well, we have $8,000 if you can, would you start a lab for $8,000?
$8,000?
$8,000. He said, yes. Well, the problem, mouse boxes, oh, well, Trinidad had some they could spare. They were going to get some nice new ones. We could get the old ones. So we got old Trinidad boxes. We had some mice up at the Evandro Chagas, old Evandro Chagas that had come from Rio in the old days. Started that colony, went up trip to start that colony going. Finally had to get some more mice from Rio, but still. And that was the beginning.
And that was the beginning of one of the biggest virus searches that's ever been.
Because it was the biggest place for viruses in the world.
And how did you know you were going to find viruses in the Amazon?
Well, we really didn't know, but we know it was going to be fun looking. And we knew that things like yellow fever could maintain, the cycles could be maintained because there was such a vast area. You could have yellow fever producing immune population, but not far away was another population, and ready, and it kept going like eddies, circles. There was just enough forest. You could keep on going to Rio in Argentina, just as we had seen yellow fever go, and that was it was an indication that here was what you could see. Well, we put out monkeys. First we had to find the monkeys, get monkeys that were not immune, susceptible. the question, monkeys from India? No, that was not possible. But down on the shore, there were islands where the winds blew from the sea most of the time. Otis taught these men that he sent out, residents there really, that they made contact, to build the kind of traps that he had used to catch monkeys in passos. And they would bring in 10 or a dozen or 20 cebus, and we tested them.
And these were non-immune because they had lived on an
They
island?
lived on an island or at the seacoast there where the winds blew from the sea most of the time. And not they weren't getting the land mosquito and influence.
And what viruses did you isolate when you
Oh,
put
this
the
was
monkeys out in
exciting.
the forest?
We put out 15 monkeys and began. Now this was another thing. Monkeys had been used as sentinels in Africa for many years, but they were used for antibodies. If they became immune, then that was a sign that they had had this infection. But you had to know what you were looking for. You had to have the antigen. And Otis decided that he would test the monkeys every few days, take a sample and inoculate mice and see what they had. He wanted to get the virus and then the antibodies afterward, but he wanted to get the virus. And so far as we knew, as far as I know, sentinels hadn't been used for that purpose. So when we began getting viruses, 1, 2, 3, and found that we got so many that we had to cut down on the sentinels because we couldn't keep up with them. But we sent them up to you, to the Rockefeller Laboratory, and they told us, well, this is new.
They
So
were almost all new, weren't they?
they were new. Well, there was Group A, there was Group B in the arbovirus, so this was Group C because some of them were related. There was Oroboku and Martuba first. And there was another virus that was related to Venezuelan equine encephalitis. That was a virus which you later showed was a new virus and not really Venezuelan.
I've always been fascinated because that came from the 8th blood specimen you took from a monkey.
Yes.
And Martuba from the 15th and Oroboka from the 17th blood specimen.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
So
right away we were
the forest was full of viruses.
full of viruses, yes.
Now you and Otis also developed a technique with sentinel mice. How in the world did you come about using mice as sentinels?
Well, we used, in the first place, we started out using adult mice for our inoculations for investigation. But right away, we remembered the experience of the foot and mouth disease laboratory in Rio, where they were using baby mice. So we established a routine of using baby mice for our inoculations. And then Otis said, well, why not let these mice be inoculated in the forest instead of getting the forest mosquito from some other source? And we set them, these groups of baby mice with the mother in the forest. And within 24 hours, well, first of all, we left them for several days, but we found that they were dying off too fast, so we would leave them just for 24 hours and bring them in, finding that, keep them under observation. And these fast viruses were killing within 24, 48 hours. We were getting viruses from the mice that had been exposed in the forest. Many times the mother mouse didn't show infection, and sometimes we found that she became immune. We didn't always test her at first to see whether she was also, because she wasn't dying. But these viruses were not killing adult mice, and were not showing symptoms in adult mice, many of them. at least not for the period of time that we needed to get the virus.